So, you moved your Israeli embassy to Jerusalem and you're wondering why everyone's mad about it. Bet you thought you were cool moving your embassy to where all the action was in spite of all of the calls to reason and trying to preserve a semblance of international stability. You know what's really cool? Acknowledging other human beings' humanity. Alright, I just had to do this because I thought the Spider-Man joke was only going to work for another few days, so this comes out on Monday, so I imagine it's already been beat. It wasn't very funny to begin with. Hi, I'm Tristan Johnson. This is Step Back. Well, that's the Thursday thing. This is your Step Back for this? No. That's me ripping off Chapo Trap House again. So, this is Step Back. Quick step, specifically for this week. The big story this week is that the United States has gone through with Trump's election promise to move the United States Israeli embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It has resulted in a great downgrading in international stability and massive protests against the Israeli government by the people living in the outdoor ghetto of Gaza, basically the world's biggest open-air prison. So, yeah, I'm sure that there's been plenty of news stories that you've read the headline for about this. Dozens of Palestinians are dead, thousands are injured, and nobody seems to want to say who killed them and why. This is, of course, like the New York Times, which seems to be all of a sudden embracing the passive voice, so they can kind of imply that these Gazans just walked into these mysterious floating air bullets and nobody knows what happened. Of course, the IDF is acting out of defense. If you don't know, there was an 8-month-old child that died because of a tear gas attack. Obviously, that 8-month-old child was extremely dangerous, and the IDF were just defending themselves, as was their defense against the man who had no legs. So, yeah, this is a really bad situation. And I know I made 2 videos about the kind of context of this situation, but let's talk a little bit more about Jerusalem. I sort of brushed past it really fast because that video combined together was nearly 40 minutes long, and so, you know, I thought I should probably go more into it in its own thing. And Quick Step, it seems like, is a good place to do it at the moment. So for anybody who doesn't know about Jerusalem, it is one of the most difficult cities to figure out what to do with. It was part of the Ottoman Empire for centuries. Starting about the late 19th century, Jews started to move to Jerusalem in large numbers to become the majority very quickly. And once Israel was declared independent state, the part of Jerusalem that is majority Jewish was considered the Israeli capital, while East Jerusalem, the part that is majority Muslim and belonged to Palestine, was considered the capital of Palestine. Ever since the 1967 war, where Israel has been to this day occupying the territory of Palestine without international agreement. It's just them, they conquered it and they said, all right, give the land back, and they said, give what back? And that's basically how it's been since. They have tried to move things to the way, like, between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, basically, depending upon how antagonistic towards the humanity of Muslims and Arabs that the Israeli government wants to be, basically determines how much stuff they put in either city. After World War II, there were several attempts to make Jerusalem into a sort of international city for those who, I guess, have been living on Mars for most of their life. Jerusalem is a city that is full of some of the most important holy sites in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So the idea after World War II, one of the original of the many plans on what to do with Palestine was to make Jerusalem into sort of like the Vatican City, like the city that would be held specially for all the major Abrahamic religions so that everybody could go there peacefully. They've worked out a lot of very complicated deals to keep people able to go to various parts of Jerusalem. But basically, since the 67 war, Israel has pretty much said that the entire city belongs to them and, you know, nuts to everybody else. They still let Muslims pray at, you know, the parts that they want to go to, but they're still under the jurisdiction of Israeli law. In 2015, the current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said that Jerusalem only belongs to the Jews, that it will only be the capital of Israel, and that there is no other recognized nation that will have its capital. Because, of course, because Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't, and a lot of very hardcore Zionists, very hard right-wing Jewish nationalists in Israel and abroad seem to just dismiss that Palestinians are even human, or at least deny that they even exist. Apparently, they want to say that they're Syrians or something. But, national identity aside, you are displacing indigenous people from their territory using violence. Whether or not they are identified as Palestinians or identified as whatever, it's not a viable excuse for displacing and killing people. I think if you remember from my video that there's still about 700,000 Palestinians living in refugee camps from wars untold, like wars stretching all the way back to like the late 40s. So Israel has been occupying the territory that belongs to Palestine. This is under their agreement. This isn't like the whole country. I'm talking about the part that when they made a UN declaration dividing the borders in the late 40s, this is what the Palestinians were given. And then in the 67 war, Israel took all of them and has been occupying them ever since. This is why you might have heard of Israel be referred to as Israel in the occupied territories. This is why. And of course, the United Nations has said that they still regard East Jerusalem to be the capital city of Palestine. Basically, the idea would be is that Israel and Palestine would be two separate states, and both of them could have a capital in two different Jerusalems, with a international buffer zone to take care of the holy sites. At the same time, the General Assembly has said over and over again that it does not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and that the movement, Israel doesn't really care when they do this anyway, but the movement of Israel to establish Jerusalem as its capital, especially the holy sites, is considered a violation of international law. But if you know anything about the history of Israel, is that Israel basically flaunts international law, breaks it basically whenever they feel like it, because they have a very close ally in the form of the United States. And the United States is a Security Council permanent member, which means that they can veto any resolution by the United Nations. And they very often do, all the time, when it comes to condemning Israel for violating international law. But as I said, under the leadership of Ban Ki-moon, there's this movement to kind of come around and let it be the capital of both. This is, by the way, also the proposed solution that the European Union puts forward. So yeah, capital cities, what do they typically have? They typically have parliament, and they typically have the location of international embassies. Now, as far as those two attributes belonging to Israel, Israel's government, the Knesset, is located inside of West Jerusalem, while the international embassies, depending upon how friendly they are with Israel's conquest and domination of the indigenous people of the territories, has had either their embassies in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, or not building them at all. In order to be a little bit careful with international relations, for a long time, the United States' embassy, one of the most important embassies in Israel, because, the whole thing, as I said, about them basically being their shield in the United Nations, has been in Tel Aviv. And they've kind of conducted their business from there. The movement of the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is done as an explicit statement that they do not believe in the sovereignty of a Palestinian people. I think the anger and the response that has come from the people of Gaza specifically has shown that they're not going to get much opposition either in Israel and from the conservative and liberal media, which basically are both pretty much on the same side of this. And so where do I see this going? Well, the main thing I would probably say is that Israel actually is pretty comfortable with the way things are. In at least Netanyahu's vision of what the future of Israel would be like, this is the way that they're going to move forward. They will keep making antagonistic movements, they'll keep building settlements, they'll keep expanding into Palestinian territory, hope for major flare-ups so that they can drop weapons of war on civilians and slowly but surely eliminate the Palestinian people, either by forcing them to leave as refugees. As I mentioned in my video, that any Palestinians who leave Israel to go to study or on a work visa for a little bit come back and find that their citizenship has been revoked. So the slow process of either taking away the citizenship of Palestinians who leave, forcing people to leave as refugees and moving them into places like Jordan, or just hoping they die. There's already been studies that showed that Gaza is about 2 years away from being completely uninhabitable. And this is intentional. Gaza has been blocked off, it has been blockaded, and it is regularly having its infrastructure destroyed by weapons of war by the IDF. So really, Israel has all the power and is in the most advantageous position to just hold the line until another flare-up happens and they move on in. The leadership of Gaza is run by a group called Hamas, probably a group you've heard of a few times over the last week. They are a paramilitary organization, they're a government, they're an activist group, they're an international lobbying organization, all in one. They are basically the sequel to the Palestinian Authority, albeit a little bit more intense after the Palestinian Authority became a little bit relaxed during the Oslo peace process, and after it turned out that they were embezzling a ton of money. So Hamas does have quite a reputation for its nasty fighting technique, but given the situation that they're in, what they're doing is fighting something called asynchronous warfare, which is when you are completely outmatched and outgunned and you have to use unconventional methods and unconventional attacks to try and push forward. That's going to be misconstrued as me defending the use of suicide bombers and human shields, but no, I do not think that this is good. I am a pacifist, as anyone would say. I do not think that if Hamas ever asked me what to do, I would not think that this was their way forward, but they don't ask me, and I don't think they should, because I'm some white guy in Toronto. What do I know? Honestly, I think there's a widening gap between what I think is a way for this conflict to move forward and what is actually happening. To move forward in a real and constructive way would require somebody to put their hand out and be vulnerable. And I don't think that Hamas is in a position to do that, and Israel doesn't have the political will to do so. They are perfectly fine with things being bad. Although there is a large left wing in Israel that is getting very angry at this treatment, and who knows, there could be some changes in the Knesset and things could be different. But it's going to require a long process of give and take and peace and reconciliation and trying to come to terms with their violence and find out what they can build afterwards. And that is not an easy task. There has been way too much ill will created, especially against the Palestinians by the Israelis in the last few decades. The last chance of Palestine to really lobby international powers to help it out was really quashed in the 60s. So at the moment, Israel's holding all the cards. They would have to make the first step. And it seems like at the moment there's no will to do so. How I think it's going to happen is I sadly think that we're going to, as like Canada and the United States and Europe and all these countries that have a history of colonization with this horrible process of colonizing the world and being victims of colonization, touching nearly every corner of the planet, Israel is going to be another country where its indigenous people are going to be displaced or entirely wiped out, and the entire world is going to complain, but no one's going to do anything about it. And we're going to have watched a genocide happen and not done anything. America's got all the nukes. What can we do? And that'll be another one of the great black marks on human legacy. Man, that's tragic. All right, so for the next quick step, one of the things I'm going to do is at reddit.com/r/stepback, I'm going to start a thread. It's going to start every Monday. When this video comes out, go to reddit.com/r/stepback, and I'm going to have a thread there every week for you to submit ideas that you have for what I should cover in the next quick step video. And you can either post ones that you think of or upvote the ones that you want, and I will take the top ones, and that's how I will keep things topical and interesting to you guys. Besides that, my only advice to you guys is call out injustice when it happens, and don't let people minimize the humanity of a group of people who have their humanity minimized pretty much every day. Do something, even if it's just complaining when somebody dehumanizes Muslims or dehumanizes Gazans and their struggle. Tall order, but help a fellow human out. Peace. And I mean it.